My name is Taylor Ursula of That's So Pisces, and it's a Pisces third quarter moon. So let's talk about it. Now, before the moon reaches the third quarter, it will have a conversation with the North Node as well as Jupiter, both hanging out in Taurus. This may remind us of what has been coming in, what has been sort of showing up, and giving us a bit of hope and a little bit of optimism about what it is we will be releasing at this time in order to make space for the new moon in Gemini. Now, right before the moon squares the sun, the moon meets with Saturn. Saturn's been in Pisces since March. And so this is the final week before Saturn stations retrograde, which it will do at the Gemini new moon next week. So the moon in Pisces meeting up with Saturn really adds a layer of that acknowledgement of maybe what is feeling heavy, what is feeling thick, what's taking time. And we might be reconciling this in some way. We might be integrating these emotions, objectifying our experience, stepping out of kind of the subjectivity of it, and really just getting a sense of what we're doing in this Saturn and Pisces time. What kind of weight have we been carrying? What's been a struggle? What's been hard to endure? And where are we able to make some sort of peace with this at this time? Now, this doesn't mean that we're okay with what's going on or that we suddenly decide it feels good. Making peace with these feelings may just mean acknowledging that it's what's happening, making space for that experience within our heart, within our space, whether that's our rituals or just our day-to-day, and sitting with these feelings, sitting with this weight, releasing what we can at this time. Maybe it's expectations, maybe it's hopes for things that have not come to manifest, not come to fruition. Maybe we're able to part ways with some sense of the emotion and the responsibility we've taken on. Maybe we can spend some time reconciling that for ourselves in a private way. Right after the moon squares the sun, the moon will have a connection with Uranus as well as Neptune. So that sextile to Uranus, also in Taurus, where the North Node and Jupiter are, may bring in some sort of new idea, new release, may create new feelings. We may respond to that Saturn responsibility in a new way. We may have a new sense of optimism as we're releasing something, as we're making space for what's coming in. We may find some second wind. We may find some new sense of abundance, or maybe it's even an attitude. And lastly, the moon connects with Neptune. And Neptune's at the tail end of Pisces, just sort of bringing our attention to how we feel about what's possible. And the moon merging into the fog of Neptune might temporarily detach us from logic and may just allow us to get carried away in fantasy. It could also mean that we get carried away in fear. They are kind of two sides of the same coin. Their anticipation overall, whether we're hoping for something positive or negative, the anticipation is the substance at heart. So moving into that fog of Neptune could ramp up some of our anxieties, could make us feel less certain about what's going on. To counter some of this confusion, we have Pluto dipping out of Aquarius for the moment back into Capricorn for the rest of 2023. And right as Pluto does so, Mercury at the tail end of Taurus creates a beautiful trine at this like 30-degree point, which means that they're both very, 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 very much at the very, 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 very last final moments of these signs. Right after that, Mercury moves into its home sign of Gemini. Mercury loves Gemini. Mercury is ready to parse through all of the information that it gathered while it was in Taurus, making final sense out of anything that's lingering from that Mercury retrograde. We're now able to implement, discuss, organize, catalyze some sort of plan. We're able to disperse this information and make connections now that can help us enter this next cycle. One final feature of this third quarter moon in Pisces is the sun in Gemini making a sextile to Chiron and Aries. Now, this may feel like another layer of what we discussed with the moon meeting Saturn. Chiron and Aries representing the initiatory wounds that we have, where we feel limited in being ourselves, in initiating interests based on our experience, in putting ourselves out there. And the sun in Gemini sort of categorizing these experiences, making sense of who we are and what those definitions mean to us at this point. And so there may be some sort of conversation internally with others, however it looks to you. There may be some sort of conversation about what these wounds around our ability to initiate have been and how we can categorize them at this time, how we want to describe them, how we label them, and ultimately what they mean to us. Do they define us or are they a part of us? There's some ability to process some part of this journey. It may not be a huge catharsis, but rather just a slight integration, a slight adjustment about who we are based on what we know we're experiencing in that kind of tricky, sticky place. And all of that comes back to that Mercury-Pluto trine where we gain a deep sense of understanding, a deep sense of what this has all meant, how far down this goes within us, what we want to do with that information once Mercury enters Gemini. We will see. We'll see what we have going on at the Gemini new moon next week. So let's go ahead and pull some cards and we'll see what we are being called to acknowledge as well as maybe release at this time. Okay, here are all of the cards that we have pulled this season. We have the cards from our new moon up here in Taurus. We have our Virgo first quarter moon pull and our Sagittarius full moon pull. Go back to check out these videos and catch up on the narrative we've been building as we figure out now what we are called to release. Okay, let's go ahead and pull. Now, if you've been here before, you know the drill. And if you're new, let's review the questions that we'll be asking in this week's pull. At our third quarter moon pull, we ask about what is coming to a close now. Oh, there we go. We ask about our previous attachment to what is ending or coming to a close. We ask about how we are able to make meaning from this process. And lastly, we ask about what we can invite in at this time. Okay, I feel one more shuffle coming. There we go, that was a really good one. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're leaving behind at this Pisces third quarter moon. What is coming to a close now? The Five of Cups. While we usually lament the five, but here as something that is coming to a close, this is actually a really beautiful feeling. Some sort of pain is ending. I always describe the five, and hence why it is portrayed this way, as being in the process of grief, but needing to remember that there is still light at the end of the tunnel. If you are familiar with the Rider-Waite deck, this is the infamous image of a cloaked figure staring down at three spilled cups in front of them. And if we look behind this figure, there are two cups that remain. And so the call is to acknowledge the grief, to own the grief, to go through the process of grief, to be in this tunnel, but to also remember and to maybe reattune ourselves to what still remains in the wake of this loss. So we're coming through now the other side of this tunnel. This part of the tunnel where we mourn is coming to a close. So I love to see this here. I think we're all ready to be done with a bit of some of the emotionality we've been having to deal with. My previous attachment to what is ending now, well, maybe we built this grief into our sense of balance. Maybe grieving and being mournful has become part of us, part of our day-to-day, part of what we've tried to root into, maybe is this grief. When we try to use grief for other things than what it actually wants from us, it can turn into some mushy roots. It can turn into some overcompensated growth. So it may be that we are like physically bound to something that we're feeling here. We've built this into our roots somehow. We've built this pain into what we've been growing. Okay, it's important to know that. It's important to recognize that. It's still an early stage, which is positive. If we were later in the stage, it might feel really daunting, but this is still really early on. So there's a possibility to undo the attachment to this growth in our sense of balance. How I have made meaning, or how I can make meaning rather, from this process. Page of Cups. Beautiful. We're ending up on sort of the other side of this cup journey. In the cups, the loss is early on, and we make our way towards more robust experiences because we know more of what we want. And that might be some of the blessing of this Page of Cups. Our intuition is now more attuned. Our instincts are heightened now. We are able to make meaning through maybe messages that come through. We might just find ourselves kind of feeling things click in ourselves, within our own minds and our emotions. We may say, oh, as I release this, as I let this come to an end, and I recognize where this has been built into my life in some way, I am having new ideas about why this has come to be this way, about what this means to me and what I want moving forward. I am more attuned to my instincts. I'm looking back at those two cups that are still standing. I'm coming through the other side of this tunnel, and on the other side, there's just new information. So we're making meaning out of the process of having to grieve. What is lost when we enter into grief? What is gained when we enter into grief? What happens when we honor grief in a real way, the way that it demands of us? We experience new lightness because we've gone through those depths. We experience new possibilities because we've properly honored what possibilities have come to an end. What I can invite in at this time. Four of Pentacles. Beautiful. Wow. Cups and Pentacles. Okay, so we're all feelings and body right now. Emotions and substance. So we can invite in deeper growth, perhaps. We can invite in sort of saving up some of our energy for what's next. Knowing that this is the third quarter moon, we can get a sense of what we're outgrowing, perhaps, where we might want to save up for something bigger for ourselves. We may be thinking about the foundation and inviting in stronger roots, knowing that we kind of invested some of the grief into these roots and it did not turn into growth the way that we expected. So we are invited to invite in more conscious rootedness based on what we're opening up to, what meaning we're creating out of this, that's stemming from finally stepping through to the other side of this grieving process. Wow, this is a pretty lovely Pisces moon pull. Okay. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know how this lands. If you enjoyed this, please like it, please share it, please subscribe. I will see you next week for our very hazy Saturn retrograde Gemini new moon. So see you then.